All right, what's up, fam? How you doing? This is Jacoby. I have an analogy that I want to share with all you deep thinking theologians while I'm on my way to the market here to get some. There's a lady at the market that sets aside scrap pieces of beef that we come by and every few weeks pick up some for our dogs.
Спасибо.
So, let's get on with the analogy, right? Anyway, so think of God as a programmer, right? So you think a programmer before the computer. He's written the code, he's written the software, he's written the program. It's self-running, basically. So like in the very beginning when God created, he wrote the program and set the rules for it, set the parameters for it, so that it would run and let it run, right? But he has full access. It's right in front of him. He knows every minor detail of it, all the macro data, all the micro data, all the metadata, everything. He sees a big picture. He sees the end. He's run the millions of possible simulations of the end result of the program and tweaked it so that it was the perfect one. Because he's perfect. He can't do any other, right? And he's overflowing with goodness. And I made this program. So like, it helps me because in human terms, we can think of AI, how they talk about how artificial intelligence will, eventually reach a learning explosion, and it will be unfathomably smarter than all of us, right? So if AI could write a program, and we know that God's foolishness is infinitely higher than man's highest wisdom. So if we can fathom what programmers can create, why do we have such a hard time believing in a God? I mean, we can create all these kind of virtual realities. We got 3D printing, and technology is just getting crazy. So, and then you just have all the math and the, laws of physics and stuff. It's like, to think there's no God is just ridiculous, okay, so anyway, that's beside the point. My point is, so you got the program. He can intervene at any time, which to us seems like a miracle. It's like basically he goes against his own rules in the code. And he does this when he needs to send a specific message with that code. He knows the result of it, how it will affect all the other outcomes. But the genius of it is he wrote the code in such a way that it achieves the end result so that he doesn't have to interfere too much, because he already knows exactly where it's all going to go. And he knows how one event led to another and another and another. And he knows who would come to Christ and who wouldn't. So then when you think, why do some get saved and some don't, and that those who do get saved are predestined? Well, this would be because in the simulation he ran, which was perfect, you happen to be one of the people. And I think, but also it's not just happenstance. He's more, detail oriented. He put every specific person for a specific reason, which had, probably further reaching ramifications than any of us would even want to bother to quantify or compute. But he can in an instant without being taxed. Okay, because he can run millions of simulations in an instant, in a fraction of an instant, right? Okay, so you got the creation, the programming, you got the end, the outcome, you got the individuals. When I was thinking about this in church the other day, I started thinking, actually I was preaching in Russian and we didn't have a translator that day, so I was just reading my Bible in Psalm 139, and I actually had the question, well, if I'm just a piece of the code that was part of the big plan, I'm a very, very small piece of the code that's in the big plan, and in history past, God programmed his own nature into Christ, basically. Well, does God love me, really? Or am I just part of the plan and I just happened to get saved because through the simulation that worked out to the end he wanted, I lucked out, so to speak. through God's providence. So all this is under his providence because it's his creation, it's his code, and he knows, where each piece will lead, right? And he can intervene at any time on anything, but he doesn't, because he needs the outcome that he originally intended with in the very beginning. And any miracle that happened that was interjected into the code, any intervention of the rules of the code, was pre-planned for a specific reason. And all the pain and suffering was allowed for specific reasons. So that's the glory of believing in God's sovereignty, because it all has a purpose, a higher purpose than our whimsical theories. Okay? Right? Alright, so I was like, well, does God then really care about me as an individual? This is a question I, from time to time, wrestle with. I mean, people say, yes, of course he does. Well, I need more than that. I need a verse. Well, there's Romans 8, of course, which is a great one of my favorite passages. But then I was reading Psalm 139, and it said, how vast are the number of his thoughts toward me. How numerous, you can't count them. They're without count, like the sand on the seashore. So in all of that code, in all the plan for all the world, those he's set his heart on, his thoughts toward them are more numerous than the sand on the seashore. So he can run these simulations, millions of simulations in an instant. He can have millions upon millions squared thoughts toward you and I. That's amazing. And he does care. So, wow. This outlook does a few things for me. One, it helps me trust God, because it helps me to get it, that he could create this world, let it run its course, but this course, these rules that it's governed by, were created by him, and he can intervene at any time. So this really helps me kind of get it, kind of trust God in a way my mind can grasp. Number one. Number two, it helps me know, like what I just mentioned, that God does care about each individual and every single all the metadata of their life. He knows all their thoughts. He knows all their pains and prayers and sins. And he loves them deeply. His love is incomprehensible. And number three, what it does is it really helps to calm me down when I meditate on it, because I'm kind of a go-getter. I get real I gotta be efficient with my day. I gotta be productive. I gotta do things. I gotta be building God's kingdom, and or else we're all gonna die. I'm kind of exaggerating on that last part, but the point is, my point is that we can rest knowing that the final outcome is glorious, that he's already planned it. We're a part of that. We're doing our part. We're planting seeds until we die. We know that the knowledge of the glory of God will fill the earth like the waters cover the sea. All his promises are yes and amen. And all the old missionaries like William Carey, David Livingstone, you name it, the Moravians, all the Puritans, the Pilgrims that came over to America, those people were going into the world to bring God's kingdom, to the whole earth. And they died knowing that they'd never see it. They died believing in those promises. So, whether I see huge revival in my day, or whether I see truth prevailing in the Christian worldview, people starting to see that this Christian worldview, the one narrative that jives with the code that God wrote, is the one most helpful for us. That's another thing that's really helpful about this view, when we realize that the reason truth matters is because we need to have the right code. When you try to preach a truth that's your truth, that's not in line with that code, you're living a lie. And it's not pragmatic, not on the micro or the macro, not for you, not for your family, not for society. And I think that's what we need. We need truth for society on the macro. We need to know how these truths affect us individuals, our hearts and minds and lives, our families, and then the larger institutions, and ultimately all the world, society and our political and economic ideologies. This is far-reaching. That's why truth is so important. That's why worldview is so important, because we got to have the right code. We got to know the code, and He gave us the book, a book that's sufficient, has everything we need to know what we need to know to govern our own lives and govern the world. And we're trying to reinvent the wheel. You know, we're trying to sit in universities and think tanks and how can we best help humanity? Okay, well, you're going over here and you're not looking at the book that gave us access to understanding the code of the way it actually works. So you got to start, that's where your starting point has to be. If that's not your starting point, then you're somewhere else. It's not going to work, and it's going to take people generations to figure out sometimes. It's ridiculous. But I think that's part of the reason why a lot of the error is allowed, because now we're living in a day when, you know, so much stuff gets recorded, so much information, that in the future, computers and AI and the real-time recording of history can be examined, and people will be able to see the ramifications of all the foolishness. They'll say, yeah, we used to think that way, but we don't do that anymore. We worship God because we saw that that is stupid. We saw that men were stupid, that we were stupid, that we had it all wrong, that it does not work. It might work for a couple days, but it doesn't work for a century. When we get God's programming, when we live by God's program, in the long run, for the most people, it's not only right, it's not only true, but it works best. Let me know if I'm wrong about this. God bless. Love you guys. Later. And don't forget that if we say the big truth loud enough and long enough, they just might start to believe it. Grace and peace.